All right. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for McKonly Asbury's virtual summer series, CEO Perspectives in Challenging Times. And I'm sure we can all agree that the last 18 months have certainly been challenging. So we're thrilled to have you all here with us today, and we're going to introduce you to Joe Arthur, Executive Director of the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, in just a minute. As we move forward, my name is Janice Snyder. I'm a partner here at McKonly Asbury and Director of Audit and Assurance Services. And I have with me Jim Schellenberger. Go ahead, Jim.
Good afternoon, everybody. Also a partner with McKonly Asbury and one of our leaders within the not-for-profit services, and have the pleasure of having worked with our guest of honor this afternoon for many years now. So welcome and glad to be here today.
Yes, thanks, Jim. I've also had the opportunity to work with Joe and the team at the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. So just a reminder to everyone, if you're willing to turn your camera on, we'd love to see your faces. We would really like this to be an open dialogue as we go through some of our slides. If we can see your camera, and you see we put a few things in the chat. So we would love to have you submit questions as well. So a little bit about our firm. For those of you that don't know us or are new to these webinars, McKonly Asbury is an accounting and business advisory services firm with offices in Camp Hill, Lancaster, and Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. We provide a range of services to a wide variety of industries, as you see here on the slide. I work a lot with the nonprofits, healthcare, and manufacturing teams, but certainly touch on several other of those. And Jim spends a lot of his time in nonprofits and affordable housing. But before I turn things over to Jim, I want to mention one more time, this is interactive. So if we can see you, submit your questions, put things into the chat, we would love that. And we want to make sure that we get to all of your questions, so this is beneficial to you as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Janice. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Joe Arthur, the Executive Director of the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. Joe was appointed the Executive Director of the Food Bank back in 2012 after serving 4 years as their Associate Director. Joe also served as a volunteer on the Board of Directors, including 2 years as president back in 2004 and 2005. As the food bank's principal ambassador, Joe presents regularly on the issue of hunger in Pennsylvania and across the country to community groups, legislative gatherings, government partners, prospective donors, and many other forums. He is a leader in anti-hunger work through his board engagement with the associations of Feeding Pennsylvania, Hunger Free Pennsylvania, Hunger Free Lancaster County, First Fruit Farms, and the Mid-Atlantic Regional Cooperative of Food Banks located in Philadelphia. He's also a National Council representative at the Food Bank's national affiliate, Feeding America, as well as a member of the Governor's Food Security Partnership. Locally, Joe is a member of the Rotary Club of Harrisburg and several other local not-for-profit organizations. He's a proud alum of Penn State University with a degree in accounting. Appreciate the degree in accounting, Joe. Joe and his wife, Deb, were proud parents of Josh and Tara. They live in Mannheim with their boisterous, furry friends, all of which have been rescued. Joe, how do you find the time to do everything that you're involved in and run such a dynamic organization?
Well, I come to work in person so that all those other things get done by someone else. That's how we do it, Tim.
That's wonderful. Well, we're thrilled to have you here today, and I know we're going to have a wonderful conversation as we talk through a couple of the things that we have teed up to go.
Well, thank you, Jim. What we'd like to do to get started, Jim and the team have allowed us to share with you a wonderful video that we actually created recently that takes a little over 4 minutes, but really gives good insights as to how the food bank works and how we've particularly worked during the pandemic. So Jim, when your team's ready.
Our mission is fighting hunger, improving lives, and strengthening communities. The Central Pennsylvania Food Bank serves hundreds of thousands of individuals, hardworking families and their children, seniors and veterans. Everyone deserves access to good, nutritious food, and enough of it to live healthy, successful lives. You may wonder, how do we do that? What is a food bank and how does it work? We live our mission by providing food through a network of 1,000 partner agencies and programs in 27 central Pennsylvania counties, an area more than twice the size of the state of New Jersey. Our territory is wide, but our impact is local. We acquire, pack, and distribute about 1.5 million pounds of healthy food every week to share with our neighbors in need. We acquire fresh produce and non-perishable items from many different sources, including farmers, wholesale producers, grocers, and farmers markets, who donate food that might otherwise go to waste. We also partner with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and other state and federal programs to rescue millions of pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables, healthy proteins, and dairy products, keeping it from going to landfills and making sure that it gets to the tables of our neighbors in need.
We get fruit here, vegetables, protein, eggs, milk, and everything you could possibly need to survive.
Monetary gifts from virtual food drives, individuals, and corporations go a long way. Every $1 donated helps us provide up to 6 nutritious meals. $1. With our buying power, we can get really good food such as fresh produce, dairy, and center-of-the-plate proteins in bulk quantities at less than wholesale prices. Community support puts us on the path to ending hunger before it begins.
Volunteers are the heart of our mission. Thousands of volunteers inspect our items for quality control. They then sort the items into larger bins and then packed into smaller boxes to help ensure that our donated and rescued food is ready for easy distribution. And in times of a disaster, whether they impact all of our communities, like the COVID pandemic, or in certain communities like our Susquehanna River towns, during and after flooding events, the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank is ready to respond.
This is like a big family here, a love. Because if they didn't care, they wouldn't be out here trying to do this.
The food that we pack is distributed to our partner agencies throughout our service territory. Local food pantries, soup kitchens, senior centers, emergency shelters, schools, VFWs, and even hospitals order a variety of items online. Our fleet of trucks delivers these items to our partners, and they share the much needed food with their community. Our partners are on the front line of ending hunger. They connect us to our neighbors who are working hard to put food on their tables, but need a little extra help. So no matter where you live in central Pennsylvania, everyone can have access to nutritious food. To sustain our mission of feeding our neighbors at the local level, the food bank shares its resources to invest in these critical organizations.
We will continue to work toward a future where no one is hungry and everyone has reliable access to nutritious food. Together with our network of local partners, donors, volunteers, and friends of the food bank, we can leverage our strengths to have a greater impact to help our neighbors until the day when we can declare that our mission of fighting hunger, improving lives, and strengthening communities is complete. We are truly better together.
Joe, I just think that's an absolute fantastic video and really does a wonderful job at just describing all that you do as an organization to support the community that we live in. You mentioned in the video that your service area is twice the size of New Jersey. So I actually looked up how big New Jersey is, and
You tested it.
I did test it. Yeah, I did test it.
You're an accountant.
I'm an accountant. 8,700 square miles is what New Jersey is, and you cover twice that, which Pennsylvania, by comparison, is 46,000 square miles. So your organization covers approximately 38% of the state of Pennsylvania from a standpoint geographically, which is amazing. How do you do it all?
Well, it takes a lot. Well, first of all, I want to thank Amy Hill is on with us today and her team for all of the work that her team does with the videography, and just also would like to point folks, if they have a little time, to our YouTube channel where we have many more videos, and most recently, very compelling stories from our clients themselves. So if you get a chance, check our YouTube video, or if you're on our social media, you're already receiving that. So very proud of that. So thanks, Amy and our team. Jim, to answer that, it's really like the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank is really like several organizations put together. We're certainly a human services organization, a nonprofit, serving about 200,000 people every month. And we're working with other human service organizations to try to help fill gaps, not just provide food, but to help people. So, we're that human services nonprofit. But we're also, as you see in the video, there is a lot of physical work, a lot of physical operations. Last year, during the pandemic, during our fiscal year just ended, we shared out about 75 million pounds of food. So that's a number that's kind of beyond description or relevance for people, but it takes 2 significant sized food hubs that we call them healthy food hubs, one here in Harrisburg, one in Williamsport. It takes a fleet of over 25 refrigerated trucks, drivers in every seat, warehouse workers, all of the folks that are associated with moving the food, and then all of the other interconnecting kind of tissue that makes a capital intensive operation work. So not unlike a commercial food distributor, but without the commercial part, nonprofit. So that's the second part, the big, capital intense food bank. And then the third part is we're also a large membership organization. So we work in membership in a network of community organizations to actually get the food to people. Our trucks are not driving to people's houses. We're driving to community organizations where people are gathering, even during the pandemic, to get their food, to get services. And we have almost 1,000 of them, as the video notes. So that all has to be managed. And in the pandemic, we had to also lead. We had to lead our partners to stay in the game when nobody knew what was really going on or how we were going to serve safely. Our team did a superb job of really leading our partner agencies. They're mostly volunteers to stay, do the work. We'll figure out how to do it safely. And ultimately we did. But the early part of the pandemic, that was a challenge. So that became even a more challenging part of our mission than it normally is. There's always a lot of compliance, and as you might imagine, with 1,000 partners or members, but it became a very intense human relations exercise, I guess I could say.
Joe, how many employees do you have within your organization?
We have, I believe, as of today, 126 actual paid employees working at the 2 hubs, and also we have people at the volunteer packing center, which is a couple miles away.
And you're going to have many multiples of that from a volunteer standpoint on an annual basis.
That's
Yeah.
correct. We were blessed last fiscal year, which ended in June, with over 90,000 hours and about 8,000 volunteers contributing those hours. So we actually went up in the pandemic. A lot of organizations took their volunteer complements down. We had to go up, but as you might remember, we were in the farm show complex with a lot of room to spread out, and we were able to keep everybody safe, in part because of that massive space.
I'm sure we'll touch on that when we get into our topics of discussion, but you really didn't have a choice to work from home and have your volunteers work from home, did you?
We went hybrid. Office workers at the food bank, we were able to implement a remote work policy that's worked very, very well. But you can't move food from home. You can't engage with your partner agencies as well. So we had a blend, but anybody who was doing physical work, we had to figure out how to do it all safely, as other organizations did. And we're very proud. It was not easy early in the pandemic to figure it out. And of course, manage all of the, folks' anxiety, throughout our whole mission. But it worked out. We stayed together. We said we protected the hives, protected the bees, and protected the mission, and then increased the amount of the mission while we were doing it.
Absolutely amazing. So our goal today, we're going to go and talk about really two two topics, and this is really meant to be a conversation. So and Joe did authorize me to say that in advance, that this is not just me and him, but this is a conversation amongst all of us here today to talk about the food bank's response to the pandemic and some of the challenges that we faced. And then we're going to transition from that initial response into the recovery discussion and kind of where things are now, and Joe, where you see things going forward. So again, I'm going to encourage anybody to shoot your questions to us in the chat. Happy to take those as we go through. But let's dive right into your response to the pandemic, Joe. And I'm just going to kind of start with an open-ended question to you. Share with me your initial thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Well, like everybody in March of 2020, we all woke up one morning, and all of a sudden this COVID was big news. Amy can attest. We had just come back from meetings in Washington, D.C. with legislators the previous week. We were all packed in metro trains and all of that. We came back, we're like, oh my, DC's, they didn't even use the word hotspot, but it was, DC was known to be a place of risk. So anyway, we settled down, got our team together and started game planning. And as we all know, everything was just, complete uncertainty, trying to figure out, what we were required to do. In the first week that we tried to operate here, kind of in our old way with just some, sanitizing and things like that, we were too tight in our operations with our volunteers, and we had a COVID scare. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, it didn't turn out to be an actual positive, but it scared us into sitting down and really pulling this thing apart and figuring out what to do. And we knew we needed a much bigger place, much bigger than our plant that we use, our plants we use normally. So we reached out to the state. They became a partner, essentially donated the farm show complex to us. And from there, that was really the linchpin for organizing everything. Our teams created a safe environment as the rules were being put in place. We changed actually the security on our main hubs and went to a locked hub with the ability to communicate electronically, so that visitors, we started to really say, don't visit the food bank directly, deal with us electronically. We set up very welcoming electronic interfaces and all of those things. But the real heavy lifting started to be around working with our partner agencies to keep them in the game. And then how were we going to get enough food? Because the numbers started going up immediately. Like April of 2020, the demand started going up like a rocket. We could see it. And the food supplies, if you remember the grocery store challenges, it wasn't just toilet paper, right?
Yeah.
It was food. All the the food, the staples were just being, just purchased over and over and over. So we spent the first couple of weeks trying to button down supply lines that were severely strained. And we really had to engage our grocers and some other gigantic companies to guarantee us the truckloads of food that we would need. And we had to make a lot of substitutions in the food. We also had to adapt and work with even more fresh product than we normally do, because there was supply in the food service realm because everything stopped. We know what happened. All the big venues, no matter what they were, stopped. And all the food was ordered and ready to come to those venues. So we were able to work with our national partner, Feeding America, our statewide partner, Feeding Pennsylvania, and the CFO of Feeding Pennsylvania, Shay Salmon, formerly on our team, is on this call, I think, today. So thank you, Shay. So we figured out how to, on a statewide basis, collaborate to capture what would have been millions of pounds of food going to waste. You saw that in the video. We always do that, but we had to do so much more of that in the spring and into the summer of 2020, because first of all, nobody wants to see that food wasted. Second of all, we needed it. We needed every bit of it, and then some. And ultimately, we ended up sharing out about 40% more food than the prior year. And the prior year was a record for us. So you get the idea of much more demand and need, while we have all these restrictions and constraints on things. So it was challenging, but our team stayed together. We worked together very well as a statewide a group of food banks, and our national affiliations, our big food donors did everything they could, and of course our monetary donors and our volunteers. Things shifted, but they stayed with us, and our monetary donors really increased their generosity in an extraordinary way to help us pay for all of the expenses that kind of went up with the food demand. So a lot going on, back in the pandemic, but that really continued for several months before we really started to get things sort of at least aligned so that we can operate and meet the need. It was a challenge.
In the video, Joe, there was the one slide that was on there about the increase in food insecurity, and that 1/3 of the people experiencing food insecurity for the first time are children.
Right.
How did that change how you approached that need? What did you do to sort of address that?
Yeah, that was childhood hunger became one of the most difficult areas of the pandemic because our schools were shut down. Yeah. And of course, now we're looking at what are they going to do in the fall. They're going to go back to school. There's a lot of work going on how to keep everybody safe. Well, last year there was no opportunity. It was virtual, and that meant there's no such thing as virtual food. So that meant that children that were really in need of those school breakfast and lunch and after school programs weren't going to be getting those. So we had to work as the school entities, and the state and federal agencies were working to figure out how to get food to the students. We had to set up our own lines of supply. So we were working with our partner agencies to work with schools to set up times and places where people could come, bring the family, and the service would be boxes of great food, fresh, frozen, shelf stable, right into their trunk, and help people that way. And we did that in abundance. That became a major part of our work last year, what we call mobile distribution, but with this school, aspect being, hugely important. And that took quite a long time to get together, but ultimately we were pretty successful. And then we continued that with the summer, and even into this summer, where we've set up a lot of new partnerships even this summer, because the schools are, they're pretty preoccupied trying to get ready for school this year. So that's kind of an ongoing story with the children, but know that that's a challenging area. And thankfully our donors have specifically helped us with affording the operations to do that.
Joe, I work with a lot of food companies, and you certainly expressed some of the challenges they have. When we fill all these orders, how do we get all the food to where it needs to be? And do we have enough employees to do that? So certainly their resources were important, but you've talked about really the importance of a lot of your relationship and partnerships with the state, the farm show, the donors, your volunteers. Are there any specific organizations or anyone that you would call out that say, well, I don't think we really could have done this without them, or it really made a difference into us delivering 50 million meals and helping all those children?
Yeah, the list of that is probably hundreds long. But and locally are, from companies, foundations, people, food companies, it's been extraordinary. Transit companies. I mean, we had FedEx step up and deliver over 100 tractor trailer loads of food for us last summer, 100, because they had the personnel. Their business had slowed, at least for a couple of months, and they were able to do that for us. They became part of the team. The Farm Show Complex, they became part of the team. Our State Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, always partners, but just incredibly creative. And they were working at least as hard as we were, trying to figure everything out and get food through the system to the food banks to help people. But locally, we had companies of all types, healthcare, banks, you name it. You have you have volunteer teams that come to us. Last year really showed the world that it could indeed happen to anybody, that you would be out of your job for no reason of your own. And it really seemed to change the public mindset, and people that weren't donors before started to look at this mission as something they wanted to help with. And so our job was to really make sure that we were communicating with them, asking for their help, and finding a way to, channel their help into the mission. And it's just been extraordinary. Without that, we would not have been able to keep up.
This whole pandemic is, it's terrible and tragic, but I always try to find some of the silver linings in situations. And I think that's probably one of them, Joe. I would suspect that those relationships that you have with your partner agencies, your donors, your community has probably strengthened during this time.
Yeah, we had called it Better Together. We had that was the sort of nomenclature we were using for a construct where better food, better access, and better together. And the better together part, really, last year we all proved that as not just as a network, but just organizations in general. We have many new partnerships that we hadn't thought of before, that we'll maintain. As you said, those are learnings that will continue. But it really was about everybody putting whatever they could into the challenge, into the crisis, and figuring out a way to work together. We had worked with organizations. We never worked with FedEx before. We drove our own trucks, but that was a way that they stepped in and gave us many, many thousands of dollars worth of value. And those were trucks that were not obtainable for us. The trucking industry was tight going into the pandemic, just as an example. We would never have done that before. But coming out of this, those are relationships will continue.
Yeah, I sort of picture you just sitting in the situation room back there in March and April, and you had your playbook of how to operate your organization, and you've been doing a great job at it. You just had to throw it out the window. Thinking back on that time, are there any stories or moments that you remember of just being like, we just got to completely do a U-turn and how we address things?
I can almost to the minute, actually. So since, of course, our clients, the people relying on us, they had the toughest, obviously they had the toughest job going through COVID. But for our organization, the day that we had to stop doing the work here in volunteers, we had to quarantine 24 of our team members that we absolutely needed because of that scare I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And we had to quarantine them for a long time because testing was slow. And so that was like 20% of our workforce, and actually more like 50% of our physical workforce, the folks that move food, had to stay at home. And we were like, oh my God, what are we
gonna do?
What are we gonna do? Well, so we had leadership team members, myself included, packing, doing all the things that normally are done by other people. And we had volunteers, not driving our trucks, but driving equipment. We only let our drivers drive trucks. But, we all kind of pulled together, put different job titles for a couple of weeks, and we got through it. But yeah, it was challenging.
I think a lot of organizations took that same approach. Everybody did what they had to do to figure out just how to navigate that time, for sure. Looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently? Anything that you would have wished?
That one thing we would have done differently. But to be honest with you, not on a major scale. I really felt like we got on the phones so fast to get help. We went into just ask everybody we need, whoever it is, that we need in this mission, companies, government, whatever. Let's start working the phones and setting up what's going to be a large scale operation. Once the first couple of weeks, it made clear that this was going to be a large scale disaster response. We got in gear. That was the best thing that we did, was start asking for help, including getting the farm show complex, but many other things. And the responses, like, other than some that their own companies were really decimated by the pandemic, either by decree or by revenue loss. They couldn't help us as much as they wanted to, but pretty much any entity that we called on for help, some way found a way to help us, and then we just organized all of that.
I also got to think a big part of that was getting the word out that your doors were open, that you still were available to the public to support the food needs that are out there in our community.
Yeah, we had immediate board support for, going full bore into this. And that wasn't actually universal around the country. There was talk of shutting down and things like that. And, we had emergency session in the first day or two with our board leadership, and we were all unanimous. No, that's not the direction we go. We go hard at this and we do it safely, and we figure it out as we go. And then really turned around to Amy and her team to start putting together the messaging channels to get the word out. And thankfully we were able to do that. We have pretty strong social media and other channels called the regular media. The regular media was extraordinarily helpful early on and throughout the pandemic. They knew what was going on in some of the metro areas. So we're different. We don't have that huge density of population, but the reality is hunger was everywhere, was just escalating. And we leveraged that to get the word out, basically.
I remember seeing you on TV. It felt like almost every night, Joe. And you were telling me only to take what I needed from the grocery store and not to take too much. And those messages stuck. And you guys did get the word out really well.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure anybody else besides you listened, though.
I heard it too.
But did you go to the store and get some more stuff?
No.
maybe not as much.
It was I joke about it, but it was actually really an issue that there literally was no canned vegetables for months because they were in people's pantries at home, planning for months and months and months. And it just kept happening. It was a real issue. It was a big issue.
So I think this might be a good time to kind of transition from what that response was like for you to where you are now. And
Yeah, so the things that I thought I might say like a month ago when you gave me the invitation, we have to tweak that a little bit. But certainly the core of this is we did shift from crisis response to recovery around April of this year. And what we mean by that is we had to look at as things were easing up and people were going back to work, our partner agencies were drained of food, drained of dollars, in some cases drained of volunteer help. People were just tired. So how could we essentially rebuild our network's energy, all those 1,000 partner agencies? So we went through a series of monetary grants with them to help, well, first of all, get some more equipment if they needed it, but mostly to rebuild some of their finances because they were expending money on things they never anticipated. So we did a lot of that, by the grace of our donors, we were able to do that. We started to rebuild inventories because the demand started to lessen. As we got into 2021, we were at a peak in December of 20, but we started to see some, very welcome lessening, still at very high levels of demand, but it gave us an opportunity to start rebuilding some inventory for shelf-stable products, things that have a long life, that you put in your pantry at home. We started to look for other opportunities. So what I mean by that, we saw the supply line challenges with big food companies, big food production. Candidly, I think what we all learned was there was too much consolidation, whether it's meat packing plants or canneries of any type. Even as we speak right now, there's a challenge with the amount with labor shortfalls in canneries, and so and there's also steel shortfalls. So there's plenty of fresh beans, for instance, green beans, but there's no cans and not enough people to work the lines. So we're seeing a different phase of that, but that's kind of current events. But what we started to do, we're piloting some very local farm sourcing with our partner agencies right now. We do farm sourcing on a large scale, but we can't send a truck to a local farmer's market for a couple of boxes of tomatoes, right? But our partner agencies can really use that quantity of food if they can get it. So we've set up a grant program. We're running a pilot that will spread to our whole territory, where we link our partner agency directly with local growers, small scale, and in farmers markets. But when you add that all up over our network, we think that's going to be a very meaningful enhancement to our fresh food supplies a couple of years out, right? So we're kind of working on those things as we meet the demand that's here now. We're working on how do we build some resilience into our food systems here from our perspective, and how do we help our entire network be ready for what comes next? And we all don't know what's going to come next. We thought we were kind of in the clear 2 months ago, and we're not, right? So we're prepared and preparing for more, demand, and we're blessed that we have the crisis fund dollars that we're still using, and talking to our donors to prepare for the worst, whatever that is. And hopefully we don't all get the worst, but we have to be prepared for it. So that's the kind of things we're doing now, investing a lot of money in food supplies in particular.
Joe, I certainly see across a lot of the organizations I work with, those labor shortages you were talking about. I see it not only in the plant, but I'm starting to see it on the driver side as well. Do we have sufficient drivers to continue to deliver products? And I've also seen a number of organizations have to delay, rework because of the rising cost of steel, as you mentioned, also some of that in lumber as well. So there are definitely still a lot of challenges to be addressed as we move forward. So they're all looking for creative solutions. Do you have any on how you keep your employees and maintain volunteers?
It may not apply to everybody, but we never took our eye off the ball with our employee relations and benefits and compensation. We've been working hard on that for our team for a lot of years now. And during the pandemic, they were working so hard. We had folks who could not take a day of vacation for 16 months. Finally, we're able to get them to take vacation now. So we did do a round of payments, bonus payments, to thank them and to help them, get through this. And many of our team members have spouses and others in their families that have lost their job, right? So the food bank family is like, pretty much any family. If you stretch out far enough, you're impacted by COVID. Some tragically, but some, job loss, which can be a tragedy itself. So. This is a kind of mission where you learn from the people you work with about what you're dealing with, at large. So we've been communicating and working with our team members right through the pandemic. There was blessed with the funding from donors. We didn't have to, talk about layoffs. We actually were hiring during the pandemic. So that's different than what a lot of companies were facing, but I think now where we see these shortages, we see employees who are, assessing their situation at home, childcare, all those things, and, not back in the workforce. But, there's economic reasons, there are other reasons, but all of that added up does mean challenges. And it means challenges for us on the services side, and it means challenges on the supply side.
With all those challenges, Joe, as you said, you're moving into the recovery phase, and you did in April, and you're rebuilding. But you also talked a lot about better together. Are there certain things that you changed in that crisis mode that you're now sustaining through recovery, or other things that are going away through recovery?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So during the pandemic, we learned that large-scale food drives are a really bad idea for the food bank. But there are people that still want to do food drives. So we're actually shifting gears, and we're directing local food drives to our partner agencies directly, so that there's a match, scale to scale. It's actually so much more expensive for the food bank to assign people to community food drives. It really actually is an expensive endeavor. But for a partner agency with volunteers, it's not. And also the food stays local, doesn't have to, make a trip through the food bank. So the food drive landscape will change, and that's a good thing. And it's a good thing for our partner agencies and a good thing for the donors because they'll be more engaged locally. So that's clearly a thing that's gonna shift for us. The concept of home delivery is very much on our minds and other food banks. We're testing some ways to reach people that, because of the pandemic, are more isolated. Certainly our seniors, but others. But also people were isolated before the pandemic, and we weren't reaching them enough. And that's a national challenge. So there is a lot of work happening nationally and across the state. And with our organization, we're testing some ways to do home delivery in an economic way for those that are really isolated. So think DoorDash, think of companies that are going to the door already, or Meals on Wheels, partnering with Meals on Wheels organizations. So we're looking at some ways to enhance our mission that way, certainly. Sourcing wise, I've mentioned we have some, the local farm sourcing is one, but we are also looking at expanding our other sources, broadening our spectrum that we work with, so that we have more options, when there is an impact on a certain industry. And then we're working even more intensively with agriculture, trying to get in the planning phase with them, trying to get into have our mission not be an afterthought during harvest season, but plan for us, and plant for us and donate that way so that we have more, we can have more certainty on the product as we move forward. So there's actually quite a bit that we're learning. We're also learning under Better Together that our community organizations, we have to work more closely with non-members. So whether it's our community action agencies, we always work well with United Way, but our housing partners that are, right now managing a huge crisis, right? Working more closely with them and coalitions so we understand not only what they're dealing with, but how we can help their clients on our side of their challenges, right? The food security side. So those relationships will be nurtured and strengthened as we move forward. That's the better way to work, instead of, sort of siloed entities spending more money than they have to, instead of relying on an expert partner who's got the resources. So yeah, a lot of good stuff happening in a bad situation. I guess that's the way to put it.
Yeah, Joe, when you and I spoke about a month ago, it didn't dawn on me how closely you were, your service and your mission is tied to those other human service organizations in our community, housing in particular. And the crisis that's going on right now is tragic, but knowing that you're partnering right alongside of some of those organizations to help those people is what I think is going to help us as a community as a whole, come out of this, if you will.
Yeah, our housing partners are trying to keep both, the tenants and mortgage holders, in place. And certainly, the landlords, that's their living, right? Trying to get, the support, the federal support that's out there, try to get that to the right places, but it's hard and there are gaps and things happen and they happen all the time, every day. So at least if we can soften the blow for the families that are, potentially going to be displaced, and hopefully, eliminate the displacement to begin with, but if not, at least make sure that folks land safely and have the resources they need.
So I want to remind the audience if you do have questions, please send them in. We're happy to answer those and send them off to Joe and have this conversation we're looking forward to.
Yeah, as individuals are submitting their questions, I hope they will. Joe, is there 2 or 3 just words of wisdom that could help any organization or any community partner to help moving forward? Anything that you've learned from, you're always setting bold goals, which is wonderful. No one should go hungry. And You've obviously done amazing things through the pandemic and now a lot of better together, but any words of wisdom you can share?
Yeah, I think, I would say again that, we all learned a really huge lesson that we don't want to unlearn it, right? We don't want to forget it, that at any point in time, any family, any individual can be kind of knocked off their livelihood by something that's out of their control. And I'm not sure that, enough of the public believe that, before the pandemic. But, I'm pretty sure that many more people believe it now, having seen what we've seen. So anybody can help, in this mission, whether it's volunteerism, whether it's donations, whether it's, even reaching out to, a congressman on the kind of programs we rely on. If you have, friends in that area, being an influence in your organization towards, raising the profile of this mission and just helping people in general. I think a lot of companies have really stepped up and will stay that way, culture-wise. But I just think, this is a mission that can use your help, whatever your talents are. Volunteer work also includes committees and ultimately board for some people. So there's a lot of ways to kind of throw in with our mission and be a help.
I think, Joe, with all those ways to help, that's why I saw this week on Monday, you guys were recognized by the Harrisburg Magazine as simply the best not-for-profit organization, and also simply the best place to volunteer. That speaks a lot to your organization's character and its influence in the community and its reach.
Well, thank you, Jim, for mentioning that. It's always good if I don't have to brag about that myself. No, and I appreciate that. Our team has worked, so hard, not just this year, over many years, because it does need to be the volunteer experience, and it can be challenging sometimes. Right now, we're dealing with a heat wave, right, and we don't have a air-conditioned volunteer center right now, so it can be challenging sometimes. But our team works really hard to make it a mission experience that people expect. But know when you come over and pack those boxes or do what you do, every single one of those is going to go to a family in need and beyond that kitchen table in terms of a meal within a day or two. That's kind of what you need to know. That food is going where it's needed. It'll be shipped out later that day and probably in a family's hands within a day or two.
It's pretty powerful stuff when you think about it. It really is. And for those on the call today, I did joke with Joe before we started that McKonly does have a team showing up tomorrow morning to volunteer and pack some boxes, but I graciously volunteered to join the October team, where it's a little bit cooler in the warehouse than what it's going to be like tomorrow. So
that was a good move.
It was a good move.
I will be over today at 4:00.
So as we have the last couple minutes here before our time is up, I just wanted to do that last call for questions and answers. Joe, you certainly answered some of the things that I was hoping to hear from today. I do appreciate that and sharing your experiences and how we can continue to get involved. Janice, did you have any final questions that you had to ask?
No, I just, what resonated with me is this is really a time where everyone needs to come together as we're calling it recovery, but there's a lot of uncertainty about what that looks like going forward. And I think Joe certainly shared a lot of words of wisdom and things that can help us to make sure we're being better together and leveraging everyone's strengths and skill sets throughout the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jim and Janice, I did have a thank you I wanted to make to folks that are on the webinar today. I actually, by chance, met with a local banking executive earlier today. Amy and I and several others did, and heard her story about the incredible work that they did around the payroll protection programs to keep people employed during the pandemic, and the volumes of loans that they did in a really challenging environment. with, some like we were dealing with rule sets that were changing daily. But basically helped save tens of thousands of jobs in our region because of operating those programs, and with other banks being, pretty much filled up to the limit. Many of those loans wouldn't have been made. Many of those businesses might have gone dark or been damaged permanently, and many of those jobs would have been lost forever. So when you think about that, and folks that we're serving, that kind of effort in that realm was vital to preventing hunger during the pandemic and as we move forward. So that's not the only example of people going above and beyond in the business community, the local community, that we never saw the people that would have come to us had they not done that work. So, it is a better together. So, there are folks that are involved here with saving jobs and creating jobs and all of that. We cheer that on, and we're very thankful that all of that was happening, or it would have been much worse.
Well, I'm looking to see if anyone has been brave to ask a question. Unfortunately, I don't see anybody in the chat who is brave to ask a question today, but that means they must have questions that they're going to send to you, Joe, after this presentation, I'm sure. And
We
Amy,
answered them all already.
or that we answered them all.
You did a great job and answered them all already.
That's right. We'll go with
Let's
that.
go with that.
I like that.
But if anybody does, when you put the contact information up, happy to respond at another time. Sure.
Certainly.
Well, I want to thank everyone so much for attending today. I especially want to thank Joe for his time and his preparation and his words of wisdom and sharing everything that the food bank has done to pivot through these challenging times and what we look for going forward. Also, Amy Hill has been at the top of my screen on this webinar, so we want to thank her as well. She was certainly instrumental behind the scenes and in our planning for this. And I know Joe appreciated that as well. So thank you, Amy. And her contact information is on the screen there as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to McKonly and Asbury or the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank if you have any further questions. As we said, we'd love to hear from you. This is the second of our CEO Perspectives webinar series. We touched on housing, so obviously a basic need, just like food and food insecurity, as we touched on here today. And our last topic, look for it, will come in September, and we will be talking about healthcare. We'll be talking to a leader of one of our community health organizations. So we are excited for that final CEO Perspectives in this webinar. But thanks again to Joe. We appreciate all that you shared today. And thanks everyone for attending. Anything else, Jim or Joe?
No, I just want to say thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it. Every time you and I get a chance to talk, I learn something new about your organization, and glad to have you in the community.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
All
Have a
right.
great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.